stretched at the time. Massively hard push.
We're meeting force for force. Small arms, rockets, whatever.
He knew himself, he was dying. He's one of the, if not the bravest bloke I've ever had the pleasure of working with.
We'd hit them again and again and again, and we killed 24 guys that day.
The battle for Helmand has cost thousands of Afghan and hundreds of British lives.
There are ghosts of them all over the place, and you never really forget them. You can't possibly forget them. And I don't think a day goes by that I don't think of them.
We just had some incoming fire from that side of the...
I've been reporting from Afghanistan for more than 20 years. In this film, I'm going to look behind the headlines of Britain's bloody 5-year campaign in Helmand.
But did it really have to be this tough? Were the objectives set by the generals and politicians realistic?
The gap between policy making and its subsequent implementation was far too wide. We've muddled through.
This is the story of how Britain muddled from one plan to another.
Yes, it was a stretch, yes, it was a risk, but hey, we're paratroopers, we're British soldiers, that's what we do.
The story of how the nation was not prepared to pay the price for success.
I asked on a daily, weekly basis for more troops, more helicopters.
We could not cede pieces of ground to the insurgent the way we had done there. The British force in Helmand was under-resourced, make no mistake.
But most of all, it's the story of those who had to face the consequences of a war that others had not thought through.
Roughly 100 men holding a defensive position in the most hostile town, in the most hostile country in the world.
Came in via Chinooks, some pretty sort of intense manoeuvring, which was quite good. We debussed off the Chinook, and it was then we came under contact.
Helmand, the summer of 2006. 16 Air Assault Brigade is in action.
The intensity of the fighting took us by surprise, not least because the intelligence told us that there wouldn't be Taliban when we arrived.
We took a major weight of fire. Being my first experience, I thought it was a lot of fire. They were throwing grenades over the wall which were landing within meters of us. It was an absolute miracle, not one of us even got hit.
Heavy firepower was often needed to support the troops.
Get out, boys! RPG! We was in a compound with a small archway, which was no more than 3 feet high. And now there was fire coming through the archway. We were sending fire back through. At my command! And Commander said, if you haven't got a wife or children, follow me. And looking back, it's just a funny thing. To move a step further would have been suicidal. We literally dived on the floor and crawled back through the hole.
They usually found themselves overstretched and outnumbered.
We didn't want to retreat, so we carried on fighting. And in the end, a couple of Apaches came and an A-10 Thunderbolt.
That pretty much obliterated what was left of the enemy. And we were able in the end to withdraw in absolute silence, under no enemy contact.
The primary mission was meant to be reconstruction. So how did Britain end up at war? Things looked very different when going to Afghanistan was first considered.
If you look at the situation at the end of 2004, when the decision to deploy southeast was taken, things were pretty good. There was virtually no violence in Helmand.
By then, Britain had been at war in Iraq for more than 18 months. The public didn't like it. And when the government suggested sending even more troops to Iraq, the generals pushed their own alternative.
What I can say, remembering conversations with those people at the time, is that they defined this mission in opposition to Iraq. They saw this place, by contrast, as a chance to involve those forces in a different, new and exciting mission.
The generals got their way. The British government announced a mission to develop Helmand, saying it would only fight if it absolutely had to.
We would be perfectly happy to leave in 3 years' time without firing one shot, because our mission is to protect the reconstruction.
In one of the poorest parts of the world, people could certainly use the help, and it was hoped the Afghans would welcome it.
I think there was a naivety, in some ways on sort of corporate level, that people felt that we were going to go into Afghanistan and hand out bread and milk and deliver development and reconstruction.
Brigadier Butler had already commanded the Special Air Service in Afghanistan and would now lead the 1st Brigade into Helmand. He points to intelligence failures.
In some, we said there was simply insufficient information to develop a long-term strategy for Afghanistan based on the knowledge which we had in 2005.
Helmand Province, 23,000 square miles of mountains, desert and farmland. It's half the size of England. The province was well known only for opium poppies, supplying 40% of the world's heroin.
There was a whole series of people who just simply did not want us there. The warlords from the former regime, the narco-criminals who were making hundreds of millions of pounds out of the opiate industry, and then the Taliban themselves. So those three very powerful groups were always going to react to our presence.
So in April 2006, the initial elements of 16 Air Assault Brigade began arriving here at Camp Tombstone, which at the time was a rather lonely outpost of the US Special Forces in the desert in Helmand Province.
For the first couple of months we were patrolling in soft hats, fairly sort of unaggressive posture, and the real aim was just to get in to the local town, surrounding areas, speak to the locals and identify tasks that could be fulfilled by aid agencies, NGOs for reconstruction.
Of the nearly 3,800 personnel first sent, the majority were engineers and support troops. They were there to build the Camp Bastion base and develop the main centres, Lashkar-Gah and Gireshk.
Only about a quarter of the people who went out on that initial deployment were the 3 Para Battle Group, the combat infantry. But very soon after they'd got here, they realised they were walking into a maelstrom.
The trouble started in the northern valleys, volatile opium country, where armed groups of the drug lords, insurgents and tribesmen went on the offensive.
These attacks in Nowzad, Musakala and Sangin were challenging our very authority and reason for being there.
The Paras started to fight back, but that exposed the reality that Butler faced competing missions, fighting the insurgents versus bolstering the Afghan government through good deeds. By mid-June, the crisis had focused at a place where opium trading, insurgency, and hatred of outsiders came together in their most violent form. The northern district, Sangin. Tribesmen killed dozens of the district governor's supporters and the police. And so Helmand's governor demanded the British do something.
Their mission was to maintain security in Helmand. If they were not deploying their troops to those districts to the north, we may have lost those districts.
Both he and President Karzai said, if you're not prepared to fight, and if you're not prepared to protect our flag and protect our people, why are you here?
The British now faced a critical decision. Keeping the Afghan government flag flying meant defending Sangin with British troops.
Everyone was involved, from me to my brigade commander to especially the Afghan governor at the time, and certainly the UK government.
Implementing the decision to act rested with Colonel Tootle.
Although we never really had the resources to do it in the way that I would have wanted to, then the logic was sound, and we'd been asked to do something.
After 20 minutes of deliberation, he agreed to do it.
Yes, it was a stretch, yes, it was a risk, but hey, we're paratroopers, we're British soldiers, that's what we do, and that's exactly what we did.
They were equipped only for a brief mission north.
Our kit was packed for exactly that, 3 to 4 days. Really, really minimal stuff.
As soon as they arrived, they tried to fortify the local government HQ, or district centre.
We were filling cardboard boxes with rubble and building up defensive, just basically out of anything you could.
Filling up 24-hour ration boxes, and we just made do with what was there, which wasn't a lot.
What do you want us firing into? Same place, mate.
It started off maybe a couple of times a day, and then it sort of increased to, 7-8 times a day, into the night as well.
It was just constant contacts of 3, 4, 5 times a day. They were trying to hit us either by small arms, rockets or mortars. We had a couple of times when they actually tried to storm the place.
They had the idea that they were going to try and take the camp, which was never going to happen.
It was just pretty much a shootout.
So yeah, they learned a harsh lesson that night. We're meeting force for force, so if they come at us with small arms, rockets, whatever, we'll meet them with that. But we're better.
Fired a rocket killing a couple of guys from the signals unit and an Afghani interpreter. These were the first casualties. It sort of hit home to everyone, this isn't a joke, this is real.
They were cut off in the Sangin district centre.
There's a building with a prominent double door, red door. Yeah, to the left of that, you've got an open doorway. Yeah, a little single doorway in there.
The deal was that we would go there for 96 hours. We actually spent a total of 95 days there, fighting every day.
Being besieged in Sangin was bad enough, but Colonel Tootle's remaining combat troops were also sent to garrison other northern centres.